Hip hop, bebop, don't stop. Hey, since a lot of you have asked, how did I do it? What synthesizers did I use? How did we make that record? Well, let's do it. All right, first of all, thank you for listening. If you don't already know, I have a whole bunch of other videos here, and if you could subscribe, it helps the channel. If you could do a thumbs up, I know I'm doing the right thing. All right, hip hop, bebop. Before the 80s, in the 70s, I was doing a lot of what I call experimental music. Today you'd probably call it ambient music, but in those days I had no idea. Well, we didn't have ambient music, and I had no idea to write music, so I used to call them soundscapes. And as I started to learn to write music, I sort of did these soundscapes, but I was learning how to write music and do beats. And hip hop bebop was a track that I did on my 8-track half-inch tape recorder as sort of I tried to do an ambient piece of music with a beat to it. Okay, that makes sense? And that's how hip hop bebop sort of came about. Now, what was on my 8-track tape and what you guys finally heard as the final mix are not two completely different things, but greatly different. Everybody wants to know what synthesizers I use, so let's go down the list of stuff on that track. The basic drums were a Roland TR-808. I was one of the first people in the city to get one, and I programmed the drum machine for that. The bass line was done with a Prophet 1, Prophet 1, if you want to Google that. That was made by Dave Smith Sequential Circuits at the time. And the keyboard parts were done with a Prophet 5. And that little sequencing line was done on an Oberheim expander module. Oberheim is a synthesizer company. In those days, they would make these little modules that you could drop into a big keyboard slot and then, you know, custom build your synthesizer, and I used one of those. This is in the day before computers, before computer sequencing, before sampling, before you were able to do multi-track stuff. So, people often ask me, and here's the big one, that tom tom doom doom to doom 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 to doom to doom 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 doom. That was not a drum machine. Or people ask me, what sample did I use? We didn't have sampling back in those days. We didn't even have MIDI, so the musical instrument digital interface. There was no way to talk to other keyboards. So that was programmed on the Prophet synthesizer. Doom doom doom. Was actually a synthesizer sound. Let's see. So the basic was recorded on my 8-track half-inch tape recorder, and when I got that first shitty record deal, if you don't know what that's about, there are other videos here. I carried my 8-track machine into the 24-track studio, and we plugged those tracks directly into the tape recorder. They wanted to send it through the mixing board, and I insisted on it has to go straight to the tape recorder because I didn't want the mixing board colorizing or changing the sounds that I did. At that time I had the drums, the bass, the sequencer line, I think the toms, there were no vocals yet, the whooshing sound, one or two other tracks. We put it up on the 24-track machine in the studio, and a whole bunch of other tracks. We just thought, okay, we got an instrumental, what are we going to do? And at that point, Raul, who worked with me, and I, we used to go out to the fun house and take records that we produced, print them on as demos, acetates, and then before they released, and take them to Jellybean Benitez at the fun house. And in those days there were giant DJ booths, and the funhouse had a big clown's head or mouth or something like that as a DJ booth, and behind was this big DJ booth and all this space behind you where you had couches and the VIPs would come and hang out. And his girlfriend was a girl who wore a black t-shirt, she had black hair, I'll never forget, hairy armpits, kind of stunk a little bit, and a t-shirt that said, "I'm Madonna." That's before she made it big. I remember that very well. And she wasn't very friendly, but that's okay. We weren't there to make friends with her. So one of the things happened when he put on a record, and a lot of people think Arsenio Hall from the Arsenio Hall started this, but when they put on the record and the kids out in the, on the dance floor like it, they'd go, "Hoo, hoo, hoo, hoo." They would bark like dogs. And that meant that they liked it. I remember the first time I was like, what's that? What's that? This raw of sound. So when we went to the studio, we opened the microphone. All right, what are we going to do? I said, we got to put that barking sound because everybody loves that. Well, those barks were me and Raul. We just made barking sounds. And there weren't synthesizers, there weren't samplers, there weren't fancy ways to digitally alter music. We just barked. The only thing you could do at that time is slow the tape down or speed it up, which gave you a deep voice like this. "I'm Mickey Mouse if you sped it up." That's about the only effect you had in those days. There weren't digital effects. You had reverbs. The reverbs were physical. That now they're these pieces of equipment. Sometimes it's a spring, and you'd send the sound down the spring with a microphone on the other end, or a big sheet. Like sometimes you see in the old movies, they rattle a piece of a sheet of tin or some sort of metal that makes that thunder sound. Well, they'd have a microphone on one end and some sort of a speaker sensor on the other, and you'd send the sound through it, and that's how they made reverb. It was physical stuff. Anyway, then we came up with, well, first of all, hip-hop bebop is a jazz term. Hip-hopping is your hips hopping. Bebop is dance. Hip-hop bebop, don't stop. So the title of that song, Undercover, is Keep Dancing to the Music, Don't Stop. Hip-hop bebop, don't stop. A lot of people say that I'm the first person to create hip-hop music. Well, I gotta tell you, before we go any further, hip-hop and rap were two different genres of music back in those days. They were, hip-hop was what we call freestyle or electro, and rap was stuff like Rapper's Delight and that kind of stuff. They were party, dance, fun records that had speaking underneath it. So hip-hop and rap were two different things. They later merged into one thing that everybody knows of today. So I was definitely one of the leaders of hip-hop music, but not hip-hop as you know it today. So we got in the studio, we put in dog barking, hip-hop, bebop, don't stop. Those were all on, the dog barks were on one track, hip-hop was on one, bebop was on another, don't stop was on another track. And when I say another, we just opened the track and we went, don't stop, 2, 3, 4, don't stop, 2, 3, 4, don't stop, 2. And then we played that down and we went, don't stop, bebop, don't stop, bebop, don't stop, bebop. Next drop was hip-hop, hip-hop. The next track, we were listening to hip-hop, bebop, hip-hop, bebop. We played it back, hip-hop, bebop, don't stop, don't stop. So we built up, Hama to Mama, and I can't hear you. And there's all these little voices in there. If you listen, we were just having fun, barking. So we filled up the 8-track tape with that. The 24-track tape with that. And when it came to mixing it, there was no verse, bridge, and chorus. So we mixed the 24 tracks down to 2 tracks, stereo, through the giant mixing console, which you see on, on TV shows and stuff like that. Those big mixing boards. And my dog's losing it. I'm sorry. Dog threw me off. We mixed it down to 2 tracks, and it was on 15-inch reels of tape. And what we wound up doing is we had, I think, 3 reels of outtakes. And what an outtake is some of it would be just the bass, drums, and hi-hat. Another one would be the drums, the dog bark, and the bass line. And the third one would be the keyboards and, the drums, with different variations, including full mixes of running everything. Because there was no song there, they would just run on sentences we had to make a song. So by making all these combinations of 24 tracks, we came up with, 3-minute, 2-minute, 1-minute versions of all this kind of stuff. So then what happened is Mike Wilkinson and Raul took 3 reels of big tape, put it in a briefcase, went to Mike's house on a Friday night, did a bunch of coke and MDA or MMDA, and sat there. In those days, used to edit with razor blades, and we knew if this was 1 beat, this was a half a beat, this was a quarter beat, an eighth of a beat, all the way down to 30-second beats. And they would sit there, and there'd be tape on the walls, and it looked like a mad science thing, and they would reassemble the song together. So the structure of hip hop bebop was actually put together as a bunch of outtakes, which was then formed after the mixing process into the song form that you know now. There's even a dub side without vocals because we took stuff with and without vocals, but the song has no structure. One of the things I want to mention, in those days, since there was no computers, no digital forms of synchronizing multiple tracks together, what happens when you have 2 blinking lights? This is the bass, this is the drums. How do they stay in sync without going out of sync? Well, that was a big problem back in those days. Today we have computers that keep everything lined up, and all those tracks that you seamlessly listen to, we had to plant so everything runs in sync, otherwise you're going to have a big mess of sound. Well, the 808 drum machine, and this is for the geeks listening, the 808 drum machine had a little pulse that came out of the back. If you know my song, Six Simple Synthesizers, I talk about having a little pulse coming out of the back of it. The rim shot on the 808 drum machine, if you'd program dum 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 ta dum, turn the volume down, it put a little pulse out of the back, pluck, 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 pop, 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 pop. And we would take that pulse, plug it into a synthesizer, and every time it went, the synthesizer would go ping, 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 or boom, 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 whatever the sound was, playing musical notes. So, we lay the drums and bass down at the same time, because with the drums and the bass being triggered, that would go on tracks 1 and 2. Then track 3, if I wanted that sequencer line going da 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 dum da 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 dum dum, I would program ba 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 on the drum machine. And this is the crazy part. We would start at beat 1, start recording. I would hit start on the drum machine, and everything was syncing, and come around 12 or 13 or 14 bars, it would start falling out of sync. We would roll the tape back 3 or 4 bars, 2, 3, 4, hit record, and I would hit the downbeat on the drum machine simultaneously, continuing to record on that track, and then would go another 12, 13, 16 bars, and then it would start falling out of sync again. And we did this, I think Hip Hop Bebop must have been 5 or 7 minutes by 20, well, there weren't 24 tracks, there may have been, even if it's 10 tracks, you know what I mean, you have 6 minutes times 12 to 20 tracks. I mean, this was like doing needlepoint. So a lot of times people say, oh, you're so lucky you grew up with analog synthesizers. It's a sound we never had before. You know, I mean, we can't get back today. It was hell. It was a nightmare. The sounds would drift. The studio would get warm. The electronics, the timing modules would shift, and suddenly it didn't synchronize again, and there was a fine control, and we'd have to control the tape recorder and control the, you know, fine tune the drum machine until these two things finally synced up again. And then 2, 3 bars, 17, 2, 3, 4, you know, I'd press downbeat and these things would run in sync until they ran out again. So that's how we built music in those days before sequencers and all that kind of stuff. And I'm telling you, it was bloody hell. So, to recap, Hip Hop Bebop was done at home on my 8-track half-inch tape recorder. That was, it had Dolby 2 noise reduction. It was a Tascam machine. I had a Tascam mixing board and a spring reverb and a space echo. That's what I used at home, but I was smart. I didn't record anything with any effects because I figured one day we'll go in the studio, there'll be better effects. Carried the tape machine into 24-track. We plugged that into the machine, played that back, and did overdubs of a couple of more keyboards and of vocals. Most of my album, Boogie Down Bronx, is not part of my first album, but most of that first album was done the same way. It was done track by track, punch in by punch in. you know, Man-Made, all those kind of songs. I think I did the vocals. I don't remember I did the vocals most of the stuff I think I did the vocals at home on the Together Again song. That I think we did in the studio because I didn't have enough tracks left. Boogie Down Bronx was a totally different thing that was done in my house. We'll talk about that. But Prophet 5, 808, Prophet 1, Oberheim sequencer. I may have had a Korg Poly 6 or something like that. Maybe I didn't use it. And pretty much that's hip hop bebop, and that's how we made it. And weird enough is when they wanted to put the song out, I thought Together Again or Man-Made, because I wanted to be like Gary Newman, would be a single. They said we're going to put out hip hop bebop, and I had a huge fight. You can't put that song out? Why not? It's not a real song. What do you mean? There's no verse, chorus, and bridge. Now you got to remember, that was the very early 80s. So if your song wasn't, hey Mickey, you're so fine, hey Mickey. You know, I'm putting out this artsy piece of music that, you know, you just didn't do. There was no song there, so I thought people were going to laugh at me, so I fought it. I really, really fought it. And if you know my original album cover, which is yellow and orange and all that, I flipped out on that because I grew up with, I wanted a David Bowie cover with me with, you know, mirrored eyes and, you know, crazy makeup on my face, you know, doing art. And they put out this thing that looks like they rubber stamped it, you know, to be on the shelves at Walmart. But the smart thing about that cover is it was bright yellow and orange. And when you went to record stores, everybody tried to have, it was new wave, dance, all that. Everybody had black, shiny covers. Well, in the middle of the sea of black was this tacky yellow record cover. And when records sat in the bin, if this is the record, you put it down in the bin, there was only a part of the record that stuck up. And it said, man perish, man perish. And when you picked it up, the rest of it, man perish, man perish, man perish. But in a sea of black, you could walk into a record store, and a sea of black, I could point over to the wall, look over there, and there was my record. So in a way, it was a brilliant marketing move. Too bad I didn't get paid, but I have a whole other video on that. Thank you guys so much. There's the hip hop bebop story. People always ask. I did a form of payola with radio station 92 KTU. I did all the station robot that's on another thing, and that got it all over the radio. And then we went to other local radio stations and said, hey, this radio station's playing it, why aren't you? And once we got New York, we went to Chicago and Boston and Baltimore. And once we got the East Coast, we got the South and the West Coast, and then we went overseas. I'm not saying we, the record company did, and that's how they built up the popularity of that song. All right, guys, to date, well, it's sold 5 million records. I never got paid, and then it's in Grand Theft Auto 1, and Boogie Down Bronx is Grand Theft Auto 3, and if you Google Grand Theft Auto, it's sold 85 million copies. So 85 Grand Theft Autos and 5 million of mine is 90 million people have my songs in their hand. Too bad I didn't get paid. It would have been $90 million. Thank you so much, guys. I hope that covered the hip hop bebop story. Please subscribe, please like. I look at the comments. Thanks.